Hi, Cambridge sellers. My name is Sage Jankowitz, aka Cambridge Sage. I am a local Cambridge based real estate broker. I've closed over 700 transactions between selling, buying, and renting in the last 7 years. In today's video, I wanted to share a bit about sort of the key elements that as a Cambridge seller you should be thinking about to ensure you get the best price, the best terms, and sell as quickly as possible. And the first place that I like to start is around Cambridge buyers. Remember, you're selling this property to a buyer. And so, really, the best place to start, in my opinion, is putting on your Cambridge buyer hat and thinking from the eyes of a Cambridge buyer. And what I've learned over the years is different communities bring in different buyers. And I find that Cambridge buyers tend to be finicky about particular things. And so, the first thing is around legality and permits. And so what I mean by this is I find that most Cambridge buyers tend to be well educated, they tend to be discerning. You're not going to pull a fast one on most buyers. They're going to look at the details and make sure they understand things before they feel comfortable moving forward. And so some common examples of things I've seen over the years where sellers make a mistake. One example is they finish a basement, but it's clearly illegal. Or maybe the ceiling height isn't tall enough and it's quite obvious that it feels a little off as you go through it. Or maybe they do the work right but they don't close out the permit, and then the buyers see that there's an open permit. It gives the buyer anxiety and they decide not to put in an offer. Another example is around bedrooms. Sometimes someone's calling something a bedroom and it clearly is not a bedroom. It's like a 7 by 7 tiny little space that's clearly an office. So, you're marketing, say a condo is a 3-bed, you go in, it's really a 2-bed plus office. Well, that's going to leave the buyer feeling deflated, disappointed, and say, what are we doing here? And if the seller did this, what else haven't they disclosed, right? Another example that I see quite a bit is unit count. I've seen a lot of times where someone says, this is a 3-family I am selling. And then you get there and you say, wait a second, this feels like a 2-family. Or you call the city of Cambridge and you say, wait, the city of Cambridge considers this a 2-family, not a 3-family. So buyers care deeply about what's actually legal in Cambridge, and not just, you can't just kind of say something and then it becomes the thing, right? It needs to actually really be the thing. And so the other thing that I see when it comes to Cambridge buyers that they can be finicky about is around the old home piece of this, right? So like a lot of homes in Cambridge tend to be older. And a lot of buyers, maybe they didn't grow up in Cambridge, maybe they grew up in an area like Florida where homes maybe are more typically newer. And so they have a lot of worries around a lot of things. They get freaked out by things like knob and tube wiring. They see these old fieldstone foundations, which are very common in Cambridge, and they might get worried about flooding in the basement. Maybe they're worried about having a foot or two of water in the basement. Another common one I see is around sloping floors. They go into a property and the floors are sloped and they start getting concerned about foundation issues. And so buyers start getting anxiety around these things. And so what I find is, some of these things sometimes can be fixed depending on what they are. Other times things need to be disclosed, and other times you need to have a Cambridge selling agent who is familiar with Cambridge housing stock and knows how to talk about these things in a way that makes buyers understand where there is risk and where there isn't risk. And that really takes a seller's agent in Cambridge who's experienced with those things. I think at the end of the day, when we're talking specifically to Cambridge buyers, a lot of this is around fear reduction. And the way that we fix this oftentimes is a mixture of properly preparing the property, and then also disclosing things if we have known issues. And that's going to ease buyer anxieties and ultimately protect your price. So I'm personally a big believer when I'm talking about selling Cambridge properties. I believe I try to underpromise and over deliver. So instead of a Cambridge buyer coming into a property, getting excited, they get there and say, ooh, this stinks. What is this? This isn't what the Zillow pictures are. You want them to go and say, this looks pretty good. Then they get there and they say, wow, this looks incredible. If you do that, oftentimes I find that Cambridge buyers will get excited and they're much more likely to get over some other issues that might come up that they discover about the property and get to the point of putting forth an offer. The next thing that I think is really important as a Cambridge seller to think about is where you as a Cambridge seller often gets lazy. And I'm not talking about you specifically, but I have seen a lot of listings come on the market and sellers get lazy, or maybe it's the seller's agent. And ultimately they pay for it in getting less money at the end of the day. And so I think the first thing is a lot of Cambridge sellers underestimate how much preparation is required to get their property ready. And what usually happens when I meet with a lot of Cambridge sellers is they say, look, Sage, this property is by Harvard Square. This property is in North Cambridge across from Pemberton Farms. This property is in Cambridgeport, one of the most desirable neighborhoods in all of Massachusetts. You know, Cambridge buyers expect quirky, and like we're just going to list it as is and it's going to go great. But the truth is, oftentimes what Cambridge buyers really want is a clean and modern looking house with those quirky Cambridge details, okay? They don't want the property to feel neglected. And so some common examples of things that I see that Cambridge sellers don't do in the preparation process that can really cost them, first of all, is clutter. They might have their own furniture and have a room could be a beautiful primary bedroom that feels cluttered with so much furniture that it actually feels tight, even though it's actually a good sized room. Or maybe you have a really quirky small room and you don't know how to use it. Now, a great stager can make that property look great and make that small room feel like this beautiful, stunning office, but in its current form, it's just like a storage space. Another example is you see holes in the wall. Maybe the home needs a fresh coat of paint, or maybe the walls are painted black or blue or red. You know, oftentimes that's not going to appeal to the most buyers in Cambridge. And what happens is when we don't make these updates, it starts creating distrust in the eyes of Cambridge buyers. And they start saying, what else is wrong that we don't see? And so it starts pushing buyers away. Whereas as we kind of check off these boxes of fixing all these little things so it feels delightful when the buyer is going through the process, first of all, the buyers start saying, wow, this is a well-maintained home. You know, this is a safe buy, but they also might start actually overlooking other things that come up as they're going through the home. Maybe they say, oh, the roof's over. You know what, the roof is a little older, but the property overall looks so great, I can deal with it. Another thing that I like to do is I like to organize all the updates. If you've lived in your home for a while, you likely have made updates. And when you put together an extensive list of all the updates you've made, and then a buyer sees that as they're going through the property, and I'm talking about those updates as I'm going through, what happens is it starts to have the snowball effect of, wow, the property looks better than I thought. It's in great condition. They've done this slew of updates over the last decade. This is a well cared for home that's well maintained, and this is a safe buy. Ultimately, we're removing potential roadblocks and increasing the chances of a buyer putting forth an offer. So at the end of the day, what I find is that clean, well-prepared homes that are properly staged are going to reduce fear in the eyes of a Cambridge buyer. And they might even start emotionally buying into the home and overlooking other things that otherwise might have been a bigger deal. Now let's talk a little bit about how Cambridge makes selling harder for you, the seller. The first thing is around zoning and regulations. Now, most Cambridge sellers are not experts at Cambridge zoning. They don't know their zoning code. They don't know how many units maybe even is possible to be built on their lot. And so I'm someone that lives and breathes the Cambridge market, and the zoning is very nuanced and it's unforgiving if you don't understand it. And there's actually been a lot of changes recently. As of this video, it's 2025. There was a big change that now allows you to build quite a lot of units on your lot if you have over 5,000 square feet. But just because there's potential opportunity there, potential upside to sell your property for more than you normally would, there's still a lot of complications that make it not so easy. So you need to get an architect if you want to consider selling your property for the upside here of some of the new zoning changes that have gone into effect. And to do that, you need an architect that's actually right for Cambridge. So one mistake I see a lot of Cambridge sellers make is they say, you know, I have a good sized lot. I'm going to sell this as a development opportunity. I know I need to hire an architect. Then they hire an architect who isn't well respected or well known in the Cambridge area. Huge mistake. That architect may not really understand the nuances of Cambridge zoning either. So you really need a great local Cambridge-based architect that Cambridge developers know and respect. that's someone that I know. I actually know a great Cambridge architect that I work with on most of my projects. I'm happy to recommend them. Just reach out to me. The other thing is many people who are thinking of going down the development road because they see some opportunity with zoning with their Cambridge property may not realize this, but the Historical Commission has a huge say in whether or not your property is ever going to get knocked down or not. And there's a chance that there's zero chance that your property is ever going to be knocked down. So you need to understand how to go to the Cambridge Historical Commission and get that sign off before you list the property. I can help you with that and help navigate that. So understanding the very specific Cambridge-based rules will have a massive impact on what happens with your property, on whether you can sell it as a development, and also just in general, what the potential upside is in the property. Maybe you have a 2-family and it could be turned to a 3-family. Maybe there's an opportunity to condoize. All those things, it's very Cambridge specific, and you need to understand the ins and outs there. Finally, how does Cambridge make selling easier? Well, number one, Cambridge has some of the most insane buyer demand in all of Massachusetts. And why is this? Well, you have Harvard and MIT, so you have world-class universities. You have an excellent hospital system directly in Cambridge, but also easy access to other hospital systems such as MGH, minutes away, and you're also not too far from Longwood. You have a great biotech industry in Kendall Square. You have easy access to technology both in Cambridge as well as in downtown Boston. And then you have a ton of international buyers. So buyer demand is huge. The next thing that I will just say in general is that when you are transparent in your sale, meaning you do a great job prepping, you clearly document what's been done, you honestly position work that still needs to be done, oftentimes you instill confidence in the eyes of Cambridge buyers, which ultimately translates into more offers and a really great price. And I think the last thing is you have a lot of old Cambridge homes, which sometimes scares people, but the reality is buyers pay a premium for historic charm. And here's the key distinction that I think a lot of Cambridge sellers miss. If you have an old, beautiful home, but you don't make the right updates, things can fall flat. If you take away all the historic charm and it just feels like a white box with quartz countertops, you can also scare buyers away. So finding a way to preserve those historical details, brickwork, a slate roof, original trim, original staircases, and making them feel new and modern, but also historical at the same time. When positioned correctly, those homes often end up selling for the highest amounts, and you need someone to help navigate you on that process. So selling in Cambridge isn't hard, but it is less forgiving. And if you don't do the right things in the right way, I promise you'll be leaving substantial money on the table. If you're interested in selling your Cambridge property and you have particular questions about your property, give me a call. My phone number is 617-833-7457.